In this video, I'm now going to talk about something I had mentioned in a video about halting an enemy counterattack during an ambush, and that is daisy chaining mines. What you're doing here, you're hooking them together so that they will detonate instantaneously or almost instantaneously with the activation of one firing device. So one firing device setting off multiple charges at the same time. This is typically done with mines. If this is explosive charges like you're trying to blow a bridge, you're setting them in a series. But first off, for explaining this, think of the movie Saving Private Ryan. When you had the German infantry was attacking through the town near the end of the movie. One of the paratroopers had set up some Hawkins mines along the sides of the road in the rubble. And when the enemy was in the kill zone, he hit the firing device and you had multiple mines go off at the same time from both sides. It doesn't have to be both sides of the enemy. You can set off your charges on just the one side. But that at least gives you that visual that you can think of while I'm explaining this. So first off here we have multiple mines, which could be Claymore type mines, or it could be Hawkins mines, Hawkins grenades. We have our target, which will be in the kill zone. I have two different ways of doing this here. This type over here, we have our line main, and then coming off of that would be our branch lines, which would go to each individual mine. Now in this one, this would be a det cord system, detonating cord system. So we have a det cord line main, and then we have some type of branch line. Those branch lines could be det cord that is tied into the line main using the correct type of demo knot, or they could be an M11 branch line if you have access to MDI, modern demolition initiators. Now when it's hooked in at the mine, depending on what system you're using, you could use a blasting cap, which would be preferred, or you could go without. You could use the correct type of demo knot. But what you would have here, you'd have your initiation system up here. When the enemy's in the kill zone, whoever has the initiation system, he would set it off so that it would go down the branch line or whatever they're using to set off the det cord. The det cord goes off, and then each of these branch lines go off a split second later, and each of the mines go off, starting at this one, moving down to this one. Depending on the length of your line main, you might be able to see a split second difference between the first one and last one going off, but it's pretty much instantaneously. Now you're not going to put a firing device directly on the det cord. That would be extremely stupid. And you run the risk that you're probably going to lose your hand when you set it off. So there would be some type of initiation system going to this. It could be, say, an M11 branch line. You attached a M81 firing device on it, or you could have it an electric blasting cap tied onto here, connected to some type of wire, like a communications wire going back to a battery or a firing device, you know, and that comes up and you set the whole thing off. This type over here, you would have the branch line, or the line main is also your branch lines. So we have our line main comes in on the Claymore mine through one side of the cap well. Then you keep feeding it through to each mine, and then you start tying off at your farthest mine going back. Your mine down here, you'll tie in the demo knot, which will be inside the mine. Then you come up to the next one, tie off the demo knot, come up to the next one, tie off the demo knot, and then you would attach your initiation system, your firing device. How you would daisy chain a Claymore like this. If you look at a Claymore, and I don't have one handy right now, I forgot to bring it over here to show you. On the back of it, there's a plastic plate. It's essentially two pieces. You have the shell in the front, which houses the ball bearings with the explosives behind it, and then they have a plastic cover that basically goes over the back, and that's glued on there. So you would take off that back plastic plate, you'd pry it off using a knife. It's a pain in the butt, but you can get it off fairly easy. You then remove the two aluminum cap wells, the two aluminum cap well tubes that are in there. You press those out going from inside out, and then you make a little channel and a little pocket inside the bulk explosives, and you save the explosives you take out. You then feed your det cord through one cap well down into that pocket, out the other cap well, off to your next mine. And then when you prime that mine with that det cord, you tie your knot inside the det cord that's inside the charge. You'll put the correct type of knot in there, and then you press it into the explosive. You take the explosive that you took out and you mold it in over the top of the det cord that you just put in there, especially around that det cord knot. Then you take your cover, you put it back on the mine, and you tape it on. I know it'd be better if I would show it to you. It'd be a better explanation, but you know, I got to follow the rules, you know, as they say, otherwise I could get a community guideline strike. So I can explain it to you vaguely here without giving you too many details and not being in violation. So that's why I'm not showing it to you. But if you actually see the materials and that stuff, you know, you'll understand the steps pretty easily. Now down here is another setup that you typically see with daisy chain mines. This here, we would have a roadway here. Okay, there's a landmine in the road, and that'll be on the in the drive path. So if you have vehicles heading down the road and they're creating ruts on either side, then you'll see the difference in the vegetation and, you know, just the level of the road. You'll see the ruts where vehicles are constantly traveling down. They would put the mine inside that rut, and then det cord would go from the mine to another type of bulk charge. Now this is something that is pretty common in guerrilla warfare. I know I heard of one example on this that they found in Angola. Some humanitarian deminers were going through clearing a roadway between villages. That roadway had not been used in decades. Well, one of the things they found a mine in a road. And then before they blew the mine, they always checked around it to see if it was daisy chained to something else, or is it that mine sitting on top of other mines? It's a stacked anti-tank mine. Well, what they found det cord coming out the side. So they started following that det cord, and they found it went to the ditch on the side of the road, and then they followed it down. They followed that det cord back to a giant thorn bush. Now they were curious, well, is something hidden inside that thorn bush? So they pulled out the machetes and they started clearing away the thorn bush. Hidden inside the thorn bush, which they didn't even notice because the thorns had grown up over it over the years, they found a 500-pound aircraft bomb. And that det cord went right to the fuse well of that aircraft bomb. If they had set off that mine without looking for the det cord, they found out that mine was located right next to their vehicles, or that aircraft bomb was right next to their vehicles. So if they would have set that off, that 500-pound bomb would have gone off and wiped out their entire crew. Everyone would have been killed. And that's the purpose of this. You have a mine that could be found, or it could be set off. And then a little bit farther back on the trail, like on the side here, you could have some type of projectile. It could be an aerial drop bomb, an aircraft bomb. It could be an artillery shell. It could be a mortar shell. Or it could be just a giant bulk explosive charge covered in shrapnel. On here, this is something that you would see inside in, say, Afghanistan or Iraq, a mine in a road, and that would be discovered by the Husky or the mine clearance vehicle, the Meerkat. Going down from that would be the deck cord in the roadway, which is non-metallic, so it would not be picked up by the metal detecting equipment, going back to a bulk charge hidden in the roadway. And that bulk charge could be 100 pounds, 200 pounds, 300 pounds, or even just 50 pounds. There would be no metal inside this bulk charge. They would rely on rocks that were placed over the top of the bulk charge to be the shrapnel. They'd set off the mine if they didn't check to see if there was a branch line, and when that would go off, this bulk charge, which would be farther back on the road, would go off where they figured the clearance team would pull back to when they would detonate that mine. This type of setup, when you would encounter this, the insurgent or guerrilla that puts us in, they monitor what the clearance teams, the route clearance teams, the demining teams do. You know, what are their procedures? They come encounter a mine. Do they back off 100 meters? Did they back off 300 meters, 500 meters, whatever it is? Well, then their branch line would go back to that location, and then they would put in a charge there, so that when they set off the mine, that demining team, that route clearance team sets this off, they don't know it. They're sitting right on top of the main charge that's meant to get them. So that at least gives you a bit of idea on some of these tactics. So if you're on some type of route clearance team, maybe this tells you about something that you could encounter. Shows you the importance of thoroughly investigating the charge before, or the IED or mine, before you destroy it. Make sure to check it thoroughly. Make sure it's not daisy chained to something else. And if it is daisy chained to something else, what is it daisy chained to? There's always the possibility, instead of it just being the one charge over here, it could be something like this. You don't have just one artillery shell, you got a series of them going down the side of the road. So you set off this mine, and then you get, 5, 10, 15, or 20 artillery shells going off on either side of the road, and you're right in the middle. You'll get taken out. So this gives you a little bit of a warning, a little bit of heads up. And for people that think about guerrilla operations, how do they do that type things? Well, now you got an idea on how this little tactic works. How did the insurgent, that guerrilla, set it up? Now, for all my engineer brothers in the Patriot and Militia movements, always remember, essayons.